Hey guys, it's Kat and I'm back today for a foundation wear test. Now I have bought a few new foundations this year and I did a wear test of my Hourglass one a couple of months ago, and I've been really wanting to do a wear test of the Beauty Blender Bounce Foundation. Now this is a really unusual foundation for me because sometimes when I use it, I love it. Other times when I use it, I'm like, what the fuck is this? So I really wanted to give it a shot, wear it for 12 hours and see how I feel about it after like really analyzing how it wears. So that's what we're doing today. So if you're not familiar with the Bounce Foundation, it is from Beauty Blender. So it's designed to be used with their Beauty Blender. Now I have used this one because I put my makeup on today. So the packaging is kind of strange. It's got this sort of well on the back that you can either pump the product onto the sponge directly, like by holding it at an angle and pumping it on. You can do that with your brush, you can do that with your hand as well, or you can sort of just pump it into the well and use your sponge to apply it. Now that's a pretty messy way to use this, so if you don't want to keep cleaning your packaging, just, put that directly onto your sponge. It's not a problem. Today I decided to use that to see how well it works, and surprisingly it works pretty well as like a dish. So instead of having to pump it on the back of your hand and using your hand, which means that you can waste a lot of product on the back of your hand, this is a more effective way of picking up product. So I get that, I don't mind that, but I don't think it's really practical on a daily basis. This packaging is pretty good though. It's very solid glass. You can see how thick the glass is. And it's also got like a little lock mechanism so the pump won't move. This comes in 40 shades. My shade is 2.40 and it's actually one of the light olive shades. I mainly wanted to try this because, believe it or not, I've got light olive skin, and I do find it quite a struggle to find foundations that match me really well because they're either really yellow, they're very pink, neutral can look a little bit grey sometimes. So it's not a big deal and I always make it work, but light olive is always smack bang where I want to be, and they actually have olive undertones in their range, which is fantastic. So I wanted to buy that for that very reason. These retail for $40 US and I believe 60 Australian dollars, but this does contain your standard 1 fluid ounce or 30 mils. So it is not a cheap foundation, but if you compare it to something like the Marc Jacobs Remarkable, I think in Australia that's $80. So this is sort of like, probably on par with your Urban Decays and your Too Faced and whatnot. So it's sort of in that mid-range point. So there are a few claims with this foundation. Firstly, on the packaging, it says it's full coverage, velveteen finish, moisture boosting hyaluronic acid and antioxidant rich white birch extract. So it's supposed to have skincare benefits as well, so your skin isn't like really dry, which is probably good because this is more of a velveteen finish. So in the scheme of finishes, even though this is not completely matte, it leans towards being quite set and quite matte. If you want a product that is dewy and very hydrating and doesn't set down and doesn't dry down, you probably won't like this. But if you do have like normal to oily skin, you will like that about this foundation. All right, some other buzzwords that they throw around on the website. They say that it's weightless, it's a flawless finish and a revolutionary bare skin feel. It's a whipped liquid. It glides and bounces easily and never looks cakey or fake, no matter how little or how much you layer on. It's never chalky or lifeless. It has a natural, gorgeous, healthy skin sort of effect. It says that it looks perfect in real life and on screen for up to 24 hours, and 90% of testers in a consumer study agree that they would replace their current foundation with Bounce. So there's some really big claims here. I do want to mention I'm not wearing this for 24 hours. I'm going to wear this for 12 hours today. And even though I will cut to me applying it so you can see how it applies very shortly, I do just want to say from sitting here wearing it, and this is probably like the 7th or 8th time that I've actually used this foundation, I do think the more you put on, the more you feel it. This doesn't feel like I'm wearing no foundation right now. I can feel that I'm wearing foundation. So even though it's not mask feeling, it's definitely not weightless and like natural feeling. So just putting it out there. The only other thing that I really wanted to mention with this foundation that I really didn't like previously when using it, and I talk about this a little bit more when I actually am applying it, is that this is designed to be used with the sponge. And I find that the texture of this being that mousse consistency, it absorbs straight into the sponge. So in the past, when I have used this, it often takes me about 5 pumps with a sponge to cover my whole face. It sort of feels like the sponge absorbs 2 to 3 pumps of it, and then the other pumps actually get on your face. Also, the pumps here are relatively small pumps, so they're not like massive pumps. You do have to use quite a lot, and it feels almost wasteful. I have tried to apply it with a brush before, and you can get away with using maybe 2 to 3 pumps and blending it in with a brush. Once again, if you used less pumps, like 1 to 2 on this, the sponge will absorb the majority of it and it won't actually cover your whole face. So I think the texture of this with the sponge, it doesn't work as well as I would like it to, but I feel like that was almost a design. Like if you're using the way it's intended, you use this up a lot faster. So I don't know about that. So what I wanted to do today, because the application method has always been one of the things that stopped me from using this, I just feel like I waste so much of it when I use it and it drives me insane. It's a little bit frustrating, is I really wanted to compare 2 methods of application. So this is sort of like a review within a review. So I decided to apply it with the traditional beauty blender, and I also wanted to try it with the new super sponge. So we did a video on this on Beauty News. So we sort of closer look at how it works and what it is. So if you want to check that out, I'll link it in the description box and up in the cards. But this is also a sponge that has a coating, like a silicone coating. So it prevents the silicone coated area from absorbing product. So you can apply product with the silicone. So that's what I've done today. And if you wanted to pick up any excess or blur it out even more, you can use the base, which is a traditional sponge. So I decided to put them to the test because this has always irritated me with how much product it absorbs. And you can see the difference between a silicone coated one versus the normal one. So I do that in the application as well, just out of curiosity. All right, let's get on to me applying the foundation and the wear test. All right, so it's about 6 to 9 in the morning. So I'm going to try to wear this for 12 hours. On my face, I just have my skincare. I've put a little bit of brows in so I don't look like I've got bald brows. I'm going to go in with the Beauty Blender sponge first. This one's been used quite a bit. That's why it's sort of discolored a little bit, but it's still fine. And I want to see how many pumps it takes to use this. For the first time, I might actually use this base just out of curiosity. I'm going to do 3 pumps. I just know that it takes like 5 to do my full face. So I'm curious to see how much of this I use up for just one side of my face. I'm not wearing any primer. I tend to do that because primer, I don't really see much of a difference. So I prefer to do wear test without it. So that's what it looks like on the sponge. You can see it is quite moussey, so it doesn't just sink into the sponge super quickly. This does boast to be a full coverage foundation, and I also find that like if you just want to apply a couple of pumps, it doesn't get to full coverage. But you can see almost instantly that has been soaked up. And I've still got a little bit left on here, so I'm going to grab the rest of it. So this does like just meld into the skin really nicely because it is like a sort of mousse consistency. You can get full coverage if you apply quite a lot of it. If I applied a lot less of it, so like say 1 pump, for example, which is what I expect from a foundation, I expect either like generally 1 pump to cover like half a face. A lot of foundations I'm using these days, if you buff it in, you could use 1 pump across the whole face, but just keep in mind that this was 3 pumps, which is ridiculous, and that's all being absorbed into the sponge. You can definitely use less product, and I find that especially with a buffing brush, you can buff it on with maybe 2 pumps across the whole face. But the problem with that is you get a light medium coverage, and it does take a little bit to get there because you're like buffing a mousse that doesn't really want to move very well. So if you do want a thinner coverage, you can do it, probably not with a sponge because it absorbs the product pretty quickly, but you can do it with a brush, like a buffing brush. But I wanted to test the sort of capacity of it as a full coverage foundation today. All right, I'm going to do a similar thing with this one, but instead of just pumping 3 pumps to start with, I'm going to pump 1 at a time, purely because we've done a test on this on the Beauty News, and we saw that this does carry foundation a lot further. So I don't want to have 3 pumps on this when I'm only going to use 1.5 or something like that. So I'm going to take it a pump at a time. So let's do 1 pump, So it hasn't sunk into the silicone because it's coated. If I picked it up with this end, it would work the same as a beauty blender. This is sort of like a hybrid silicone sponge and a normal sponge, but the good thing about it is it's not like you're just hitting your face with a shoe, which is what I think a silicone sponge feels like. This is actually soft enough and even softer than other sponges that I own, so you can bounce the product on your face. So you can apply it just with this, but if you wanted to go in and diffuse it more or soak up excess, you can use the base. So you can see how it just sort of smears it around rather than absorbs it. So it does settle in the silicone little pores, but most of it does go on your face, which is great. So it's a big difference so far, 1 versus 3 pumps. One thing I have noticed is it doesn't get around the nose as well as a normal sponge. But if you just look at the coverage, it's almost looking identical. So we're almost there with the coverage. I feel like on my cheeks where I started, it is the same coverage as this. I just feel like there are some patches that I haven't quite got to yet. I feel like this doesn't cover the surface area. So when you're using a sponge, for example, and you hit an area, it covers quite a lot of area. Whereas I feel like when you use this, it doesn't cover as much area because it's a little bit firmer. So yeah, even though I think it's built up the coverage really well with 1 pump, there are just some areas that I sort of want to tackle a little bit more to make it completely even. So I'm going to try to go in with half a pump if that's possible. Let's try to do half. That's about half a pump. So I'm just going to use that. So just here where I've got some dots going on, and just on my sort of around here where I sort of neglected a little bit, and on my neck, I want to take it down just a little bit. But that half a pump has already gone pretty far compared to the other side. All right, so this foundation is looking pretty good. Of course, I need a little bit of concealer under my eyes. I would set this by powdering it a little bit. It does have a velveteen finish, so if you don't want your foundation to be completely set and completely matte, this is set and matte enough. It's got a little bit of a shine to it, so it still has a little bit of a healthy glow, but it feels like it doesn't transfer and it feels like it's really set. So that's really nice about it. The coverage, it says that you can go up to full coverage. I don't think you should. I think it possibly could, but for example, this is a high coverage, what I've got at the moment. You can still see skin sort of concerns peeking through, but I think that makes it look a lot more healthy. And as it is, I can feel that I'm wearing foundation. I feel like I've put quite a lot on. Well, I put 3 pumps on one side and 1.5 on the other side. So I have put on quite a lot, and I just wouldn't recommend putting on extra to make it like full coverage. So full is where you've like blanked out all your skin. High is just when you've blanked out most of your skin, but you can still see some skin coming through. Now, I think this is a nice looking foundation, even though it is a high coverage. It looks like it blends with my neck really well. There are a lot of shades, so you can find a good match. And even though, like I said, it's a higher coverage, because I can see things peeking through, like I can see a little bit of redness here. I can see a few breakouts down here. It sort of looks quite natural, which is really nice. I do think when I was looking up a bit closer, on this side, I can see the pores a lot better, and I feel like it's because of the application. Seems like one of the downfalls with this super sponge is that it doesn't really pack the product into the pores, so it sort of just skims over the pores and you're left with pores that are sort of emphasized, whereas it doesn't happen with this. So if you do use a super sponge or something like it to apply this foundation, which I recommend because you save on so much foundation, I would probably put it on and then use the base around the areas that have visible pores, because that will give you a more smooth finish. All right, I'm back with my makeup done. I'm not wearing any highlighter because I do like to see in foundation wear tests when my oils start to break through, and highlighter often like masks that, or it looks like it's more shiny because of the highlighter, so I skip that. The rest of my base products are pretty much Project Pan products. I use a Too Faced Peach Perfect powder to give this a really good shot, because that's a really beautiful powder. It works really well on me, in case you're wondering. On my eyes, Suva Beauty the Rose Period palette. And I've got a mini Bare Minerals Gen Nude lip gloss in everything on my lips, in case you're wondering. Anyway, so makeup has sat so well over this. It feels super smooth, really nicely set with a little bit of powder. I only needed the small amount, and bronzer and blush just blended like a dream on top. So this really does hold makeup really well. It looks almost flawless. Concealer just helped with that little bit of darkness under my eyes. I really like the look of this with makeup over the top. All right, I just want to do a quick check-in. It is just after 12 o'clock, so this is at the 3-hour mark, no touch-ups. I want to check in now because I'm just about to eat like a bread roll and it's crunchy and I thought it might smear things everywhere, and if that's the case I want to check in before that happens. But there are a couple of things that I wanted to note. Firstly, is I've noticed there's a little bit of oxidizing. So I don't know if you can see, but where it's on my neck, it is slightly darker than what it was before. So this is sort of developing a little bit. I'm also seeing a little bit of, it's like oil patchiness. It's really strange. So it looks like it's a little bit of dry patchiness, like not dry patchiness. Looks like there's matte dots and then some of it's shiny. It's almost looking like the oil is breaking through at a like uneven rate, but it still looks very put together, looks very glowy. It's just a little bit darker than it was before. And yeah, like I said, I can see that slightly on my neck. I can just see where I brought the foundation. So you can see the difference there. But it's only maybe like half a shade darker. So it's nothing crazy. But if you are between two shades, you might want to go a lighter one. It's always a good rule of thumb anyway, because you can always bronze up a lighter foundation. It's always harder to lighten a darker foundation. So that's always sort of rule of thumb. I will zoom in a second so you can sort of see it a little bit closer. It looks like there's a little bit of oil starting to break through on my chin, but it's not breaking down the foundation yet. For all the new people, I totally forgot to mention that I have oily combination skin. So I do battle with oil breaking through my T-zone. And my biggest thing that I look for in a foundation is not only something that looks good and is comfortable, but I know that it will last throughout the day. So that's always one of my biggest things that I look at. Does oil break down the foundation? Right now, not yet, which is fantastic. But today as well, it's not a warm day. I'm not putting it under a lot of like strenuous exercise or anything. So this is a cooler climate today. I'm just home editing and I'm going to go out and run a few errands. So I'm not putting it to the maximum test. This is sort of like I'm wearing a t-shirt, so it's clearly not super cold. But it's not a really, really hot day where I'm sweaty and really, really oily. It's pretty much a standard temperature day. So you can see that the skin looks really blurred, really beautiful. There is, like I said, just a little bit of weird sort of texture going on in my forehead. It looks like some bits are catching the light and other bits aren't. Got a little bit of oil starting to break through on my chin. It's holding the blush and bronzer really nicely. And it looks very similar to when I first did my makeup 3 hours ago or 2.5 hours ago. So I'm digging it so far. All right, guys, it is now 5:05 p.m. So this foundation has been on for 8 hours and the oil has started breaking through. So you can see on my chin, I might turn this brightness down a bit. It's starting to get dark, so this will be the last time I check in with natural lighting, but let's move the camera a bit closer. You can see how much of an oil slick I have become. And this is actually not too bad. Once again, it's patchy on my forehead, so I feel like there's parts that wore better than others, but around my nose, it has completely, ignore the cat scratching on the scratching pole. It has pretty much started breaking down the makeup. So there's patches where there's no foundation, same as that side, you can see it there. And on my chin, it is starting to break down as well. But the cheeks are like perfect where my skin is normal. But in my T-zone, it's just, yeah, it's so bizarre seeing like, if you hide that part, you're like, oh, that's nice, that's fine. And then you show the T-zone, you're like, oh, okay, that's a greasy mess. So it's still predominantly together. There are a lot of foundations that I've tried that break down even more at this stage. But if I wasn't doing a wear test without touching up, this is a stage I'd get some blotting tissues, blot around the nose, blot one there on the chin, touch it up with a bit of powder, and it definitely would breathe a bit more life into this makeup. But as it is, I don't have any confidence that this is going to last even to 12 hours looking good, because it's starting to look shit at the 8-hour mark. So yeah, this is a foundation I'd recommend touching up by 8 hours for sure to prevent it from breaking down even more. All right, guys, it is 9:33 p.m. So I've had this on for well over 12 hours and I am starting to see it break down. I'll zoom in, you can see it's starting to get quite patchy. So it's reached a point that it can no longer hold the oils and it's starting to break down. An interesting thing about that as well is that I've noticed that the color of my face now is very different to the color of my body. So I don't know if you can see it on camera as much, but I almost look like greeny yellow, like it's turned a sort of weird color and it no longer matches my body. So definitely once the oils start to break through, it oxidizes and it starts to break down. So this is beyond fixing. If I probably touched it up, blotted it, maybe put a little bit of concealer around my nose, powdered, this would have worn a lot better by this point, but just with no touch-ups, it has completely broken down. So on the cheeks, it's still looking okay, but it is looking a little bit patchy. You can see the bronzer is starting to sit a bit patchy, and it is looking a little bit chunky. So let's zoom in so you can see what I'm talking about. So here we got the forehead going on. You can see it breaking down at this point. You can see that if you do start touching things, it starts smearing and moving. And you can also see that I look like I'm a Simpsons character with the color. It's just looking so, like, I don't even know. It's not even yellow. It's just looking really horrible. You can see that it's really broken down around my nose almost completely, and also on my chin, it's just like an oily pool. It's really gross. There's the foundation. All right, so what do I think about this foundation overall? I think there are some pros and some cons, and it is not my favorite foundation. And I think out of the foundations that I tried this year, I still think the Becca one is worse than this because it transfers straight away and breaks down straight away. But definitely the Hourglass one, the one in the pump bottle, is a lot better than this. It's got good coverage, you use way less product, it wears a lot better, and this is just not great at 12 hours. I think the pros of this is that it does blend to the skin really nicely. So with a sponge, with a brush, because it's that moussey texture, it sort of like just sits on the skin really nicely. I do think that the undertones that the range has is really nice and refreshing, that it has, you know, cool, warm, neutral, and olive. So I think those are good, but the finish looks quite nice when you first put it on, but it definitely on oily skin starts to degrade at around the 8-hour mark, and then just pretty much shits its pants by the 12-hour mark. So for me, this would be a foundation that if I was going out for a few hours, I would happily reach for it. But it is not one that I would wear if I'm going out for a long day, or if I've got a long evening where I want my makeup to look really good. This is not the foundation I would reach for, unfortunately. So main cons for me is that it takes a lot of product to apply to your face. Not everyone's going to have the fancy super sponge that's covered with silicone that like prevents a sponge from absorbing product. So if you're going to use it with a brush or with a sponge, you're going to be using, you know, 3 to 4 to 5 pumps to cover your whole face. And I think that's way too much foundation. It doesn't sit as comfortably as they make out it to be. And it just feels really wasteful. Another con is that it starts to oxidize. It's not a big deal at a few hours in. You just start to see it go a little bit darker in color. But by the time your oils break through, I actually look like an Oompa Loompa. Like, it looks really very different from my skin, and it's just not a very flattering color. So definitely doesn't have much oil control. And I can't imagine this in any circumstance wearing 24 hours. So at least on oily skin. I have also heard a few people say that this feels really dry on them. So if you have drier skin, this probably wouldn't be great for you anyway, because the matte, or the, what do they call it? Velveteen finish will be too dry for you. So I think this is supposed to be the normal to oily skin people, but it just doesn't wear long enough. There have been times that I've worn this and I've been really impressed with it, but I just feel like it's hit or miss. Some days works really well, other days it doesn't look as good. Some days if it's hot and you're running around and sweating a bit, it's gonna break down even faster. So it's just not a reliable foundation in my opinion. So yeah, I will use it up, but I will not repurchase it, unfortunately. Anyway, guys, hopefully you enjoyed that, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Bye.